Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you will hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show, and that's where we have on someone associated with the land development industry. We hear about their origin story, and then we dig into some industry related topics. Other times, like today, we have industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the industry. Now, joining me on these industry news episodes, as always, is Charles Covey. Charles, how's it going today?
Going well. Good to be here.
So we have a few different topics to dig into. We obviously have to cover some additional following of the current administration and some of the activity that's going on with HUD, tariffs. But also, I wanted to make sure that today we got into some industry-specific topics that aren't necessarily related to what's going on in the current administration. Because I know our last couple of episodes, we've done a lot with the administration because it does have a big impact on what's going on within the industry and everything. So definitely some good topics here to dig into.
Yeah, these are going to be fun.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into our first article. The first one comes to us from Fox News. This one is actually a video. So we'll, after reading the headline here, we'll get into the video and then we will react to the video. So headline reads, exclusive, Trump HUD secretary cancels $4 million in DEI contracts after launching DOGE task force. So let's go ahead and listen to this quick interview and then we will react.
All right. So DOGE cuts are coming everywhere and all around the government. And federal agencies aren't waiting for Elon Musk to start. Some are doing it themselves. In just 1 week, the Department of Housing and Urban Development owned DOGE task force uncovered $1.9 billion in misplaced, close quotes, funds and started cutting $260 million in wasteful contracts. And joining us now with an exclusive announcement on what is getting cut first, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner. Mr. Secretary, great to see you. What do you have to tell our audience about what you discovered just 30 days in?
Well, thank you, Brian. It's so great to be with you and the American people this morning. So we have found, as you said, $260 million in savings here at HUD, working with our DOGE task force. But today, we're announcing that we cut $4 million in DEI contracts here at HUD, which were supposed to be for culture transformation and mindset, outward mindset thinking and subscription services. So we want to announce today, we're working hard and we will cut $4 million in DEI-focused contracts. This is money that should go to serve the American people and also time well spent to serve the people we're called to serve. And so, DEI here at HUD is dead, Brian.
True. And that's one thing the president made clear when he was running for office, and he did it right away when he got in. But the question I get from a lot of people is, okay, now that you saved it, I know it's in the department's interest to use that money and repurpose it, but maybe it's in the country's interest to save it. So do you write a check to somebody else and say, okay, take this money? Do you take it out of your account that's allocated? How do you put that back into the system?
Well, and that's a great question, and in addition to this $260 million in savings, we also found $1.9 billion in misplaced funds. And those funds were supposed to be used for administrative services that help us carry out the services here at HUD. And when you don't use those funds, they don't just go to the next year. You're supposed to notify the Department of Treasury that these funds are now available for other federal expenditures. And that did not happen. It was great mismanagement and negligence over the past few years from the Biden administration. So now that we've found this $1.9 billion, we can notify and we have de-obligated these funds, to answer your question, so that the Treasury Department can use those for other federal expenditures for the American people.
And even paying down the debt. President Trump signed an executive order ending all federal taxpayer benefits for illegal immigrants and orders all federal agencies and departments to identify federally funded programs like you're doing. So that is already impacting HUD, correct?
Yes, and it's really common sense, and under President Trump's leadership, the hard earned money of American taxpayers, that money should go to serve the American people. And that's what we're going to do here at HUD to ensure that we're deliberate and detailed about the expenditures that we have to serve the American people.
Mr. Secretary, I'm up against the break, but just real quick, the purchase of corporate housing by people like, BlackRock, it's a good investment for them, but it's really not good for the American people. Is there anything you're going to do to push that back and give people a chance at owning their own homes and not having to go to a corporation?
Well, Brian, here at HUD, we're laser focused on bringing down the cost of housing. Regulations are a tremendous burden. So regulatory reform here at HUD, both federally and in the state and local municipalities, is a great focus for us. We have to build more supply for the American people when it comes to workforce and affordable housing. And that's what we're focused on. Regulatory reform, bringing down the cost, raising the supply, and getting our fiscal house in this country in order, bringing inflation down and bringing interest rates down. And so that's our mission. To help people achieve the American dream and home ownership.
And that's such an important job you have, and I know you know it. Secretary Scott Turner, thanks so much.
So there are a couple things in this when I was preparing for this episode. There are a couple things that stood out to me that I wanted to get your thoughts on. The first one, I think that's important, is it seems like as the DOGE task force is going through, they're finding a lot of misplaced money, right? So he mentioned, and I don't know if this was DOGE or his own group that found the nearly $2 billion of misplaced funds. I don't know exactly what that means. Like if these were funds that were being used for something that they weren't supposed to be used for, or they just weren't being used, I'm not entirely sure. But I think that's good that we're uncovering some of those things, because, a lot of times we get these questions, or we get a lot of people who are saying, we need to give these groups more money, more money, more money. They say the same thing about education and schools, right? The schools need more money, more money, more money. But then you come to find out that they're not even using the money they have in the right way, or they're misusing it. And so that was one thing that stood out to me. The other thing was the BlackRock question at the end. He kind of dodged it. He didn't really answer the question the way he asked it. I don't know the right answer for this, because I know a lot of people who listen into this show are companies who buy up properties. They're not the size of BlackRock or anything, but they buy up properties and they hold them as a business. And there's a lot of people out there who don't want businesses to be able to own these properties, which I don't think that's a good idea. But then the question does come back to how much real estate is too much real estate for one entity to own in a free society. And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know that the administration is going to do anything about that, because they are business friendly. But I do think it's something that continues to come up in conversations or in articles and things like, what do you do about these massive institutional real estate holding companies?
Yeah, well, I have a great answer for that one, because that one comes up a lot in my world. If you look at the numbers, and I was looking, for that exact figure, and I couldn't find it. It was single digit percentage. I think it was 2 or 3% of single family homes owned by corporate buyers. So 2 or 3% that's not moving the needle. So everybody loves this talking point, and I wish Secretary Turner would have addressed that specifically, because that's a data point that he really needs to hone in on, because this is a talking point that is way overblown, and the corporate ownership it's not even enough to matter.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good that you bring that up. I was trying to look for that number too, and it did look like it was a pretty low number when I was looking, because I came across when I was researching this specific topic, I came across a video. I think it was from probably last summer, when RFK Jr. was still a presidential candidate, and he was running, and he was on some podcast, and he was talking, and he said this really massive number in that. Like he said, I don't even remember the percentage, but it definitely was not single digits that he referenced, and I could not find any data to support that. I know there's concerns about it just from people in general. When you hear people talk about the fact that you're going to have to rent, or you'll rent, or you'll own nothing and be happy with it. People like to quote that a lot from Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. But so people pay close attention to it, but sometimes it can be hard to get the real numbers and what they actually own. And I wonder if some of that has to do too with these big companies like BlackRock. They don't necessarily own the property directly. They own it through different entities, or they invest in different, I don't know if it's REITs or what they invest in to actually give them a percent ownership of all these different properties and things. But glad you brought that up, the single digit percentage, because that is something good to mention here.
Well, and there's a reason for that. If it was more profitable, they'd own more. But owning single family homes is not a high margin business. And there was a bunch of them post COVID that tried to buy up a bunch of homes. And most of those have either stopped doing it or have failed completely. And it just doesn't work. That model is very inefficient. So BTR is essentially the corporate version of that, where you're building an entire subdivision and you own those like apartment complexes. So that works, and that's very profitable. But trying to go buy individual single family homes across a city, and you buy 10 in this subdivision and 10 in that subdivision and 20 over here, it isn't an efficient process. And trying to rent those is just not. It hasn't shown to be a highly profitable game, and so I don't think you're going to ever have a serious problem with owning large portfolios of individual homes scattered across a municipality.
Yep. Well, let's keep it moving. Let's go on to the next article here. The next one comes to us from CRE Daily. Headline reads, Self-storage rent drops slow as supply pressure eases. So reading from this article, advertised rental rates dropped 1.2% year over year in January, an improvement from December's 2.2% decline and November's 2.4% dip, according to Yardi Matrix's February self-storage report. The national average rent per square foot across all unit sizes and types climbed 0.3% month over month to $16.32, outpacing January 2024's 0.6% and January 2023's 0.1% month over month performance. The supply pipeline continues to shrink, with projects under construction nationwide down 10 basis points from December. Meanwhile, 3-year supply projections have steadily decreased from 9.1% in January 2024, with Yardi Matrix forecasting a 15% drop in 2025 supply compared to 2024. The slowdown in deliveries is expected to provide a tailwind for the sector. While self-storage operators continue to attract new tenants with low introductory rates while raising rents for existing customers, self-storage REITs have been less aggressive in discounting rates than their non-REIT competitors. This strategy has helped maintain stability in a market that has faced headwinds from oversupply in recent years. Looking ahead, the self-storage sector's performance will largely hinge on supply trends and macroeconomic conditions, with the new deliveries declining and demand drivers like severe weather events playing a role. Market conditions could continue to improve in 2025. So I know this is a space that you have some experience in, or at least some knowledge of. And what are your thoughts, I guess, as you hear this?
Yeah, this is one that I have to follow because when we're talking to investors that are investing in some of our funds, this is a competing investment type. And so it's important for me to understand it pretty well. And we've been watching this intently for the last couple of years. And if you look at the last decade, the self-storage funds have been really high performers. Some of the best, maybe the best performers on average in the real estate space. But it does appear that that they had a good run, but I think in most of the major municipal areas where they're working, I know in Dallas Fort Worth this is definitely the case. Most of the good sites have been built, and so it's now they had a really big push, and now they're running out of good sites where they can really get the rents necessary. And because they were so performing, and this is how real estate works, the people that are in early do really well, the people that are in the middle do pretty good, and the people that are in at the end, they usually get burned. And so I think we're at the end of the peak there. And so I think there's some of those funds are doing okay, but not great, not nearly the level of performance that they're used to over the last decade. And so that's just part of the game. That's just what happens. We'll probably see a little bit of a boost in a couple of years for them because now we've got this supply element that's related to interest rates. So it's just harder to get deals funded right now. That'll improve a little bit this year. So you'll see things pick back up in 26 and 7. But overall, that's I think if you want to call it a bull run or whatever that good 10-year time frame was, I think that's probably ended, and they're trending down a little bit. Still decent returns, I think, on well located self storage. But the funds that were having to just gather up any self storage they could put on the ground, I think there were some very poor performing properties in some of those portfolios.
I wonder with self-storage, I haven't done much research into this asset class, but renters of self-storage, I assume, is this mostly consumers who are renting space in self-storage? Do you happen to know? Like, is it?
Yeah. So they co-locate, especially you want to see apartments and you want to see those kind of, or smaller homes where you just don't have enough storage, you don't have enough space, and somebody that, as Americans, we like our stuff. and
Yeah.
and we're willing to pay monthly to put it in somewhere just to hold on to it, even though we don't go there and we don't check on it, and it just it just sits there. For whatever reason, that seems to be a largely American thing. We don't see this trend in other countries for some reason. So we
Yeah, it
are
makes
very
sense.
attached to our stuff, and self storage serves that.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Groove is the all-in-one platform for managing your land prospecting and deal management workflow. Easily find parcel owners, track deals, and organize research, all on a single centralized map. No more juggling multiple maps from different deals. With Groove, you can associate points of interest with new deals while keeping everything in one place. And when it's time to share a deal, generate a private link to give prospective buyers and investors access to key details. Proudly American designed, developed, and supported, Groove continues to evolve with new features to help you work smarter. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next article here. This one comes to us from Globe Street. Headline reads, North Texas cities lead U.S. housing growth. Subheadline, a focus on single-family housing has created a significant gap in the middle housing sector. Reading from this article, regions in North Texas are leading the nation in housing growth while the rest of the country experiences a construction slowdown. According to an analysis by Storage Cafe, 4 cities in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex rank among the 15 fastest growing housing markets nationwide and are breaking records across key sectors. Across the country, housing inventory grew 16.7% from 2005 to 2023, but a housing deficit of about 3.7 million homes remains, the report said. Texas is at the forefront of that growth, with 15 cities ranking among the top performers in housing stock over that time period. The Dallas metro area in particular performed well thanks to its high density of top growth housing markets. Frisco has tripled its housing inventory since 2005, surpassing 85,000 units in 2023. The city ranks first nationwide for multifamily and single-family home growth. Strong housing growth positively impacts the self-storage market. In Frisco, self-storage inventory reached about 1.7 million square feet in 2023, more than doubling its capacity over 2 decades. The average cost of storage units in the city is $142 per month. McKinney and neighboring Allen posted the fastest growth in middle housing inventory, increasing 185% and 182% respectively. McKinney also had a 127% overall housing inventory expansion, reaching nearly 79,000 units, and Allen's housing stock grew by 76% to reach 40,600 units in 2023. 6 Dallas Metroplex cities also saw housing inventory expansion of more than 50%, driving much of the growth in North Texas, the report said. These markets were previously affordable, but have become more competitive as home prices have more than doubled across the region. In Frisco, prices increased 227%, followed by Fort Worth at 218%, and Denton at 207%. Across the country, middle housing, including duplexes, triplexes, and small apartment buildings, has trailed other housing sectors with growth of just 11%. In the Dallas Metroplex, only 3 suburbs expanded in the middle market sector. Fort Worth saw a 22% increase in this category, while Dallas posted a decrease of 9% between 2005 and 2023. The middle market is considered a crucial element in addressing housing affordability, but in Texas cities with significant price hikes, middle housing makes up less than 20% of inventory, and demand far outpaced supply, said Storage Cafe. Nationwide, middle market housing increased by 11.3% from 2000, says 25 here, but I think they mean 2005 to 2023, which was the smallest growth among all housing types. Within middle housing, townhouses had the largest increase, up 29% to a total more than 9 million units. So this is your area. I'll let you go ahead and give us your thoughts on this, Charles.
Yeah, so this is my area in more ways than one. It is geographically, and then also the product types that we focus on are really more middle market. So yeah, so I live in Frisco. We have projects in this area. So Frisco, Allen, McKinney, Anna to the north of that, Salina, Prosper to the north of Frisco. Like this is the concentration of growth in North Texas. So those are all in Collin County. And I was just at a meeting earlier this week with Chris Hill, who's the county judge. And it's essentially in Texas, the county judge is essentially the mayor of the county. So he doesn't actually preside on any cases. He's just overseeing the operations of the county. So he works with the commissioners and all the other departments, and he oversees what goes on in the county. And the amount of money that's flowing in the county is really incredible, right? They've got an unbelievable tax base, all the growth, and he's managing it well. So a super good dude. I really enjoyed hearing him give an update on Collin County and what's happening. So I think the list that he gave, just based on percentage growth, I think that it was 8 or 9 of the top 40 fastest growing cities in the country are in Collin County. I mean, just think about that. That's
crazy.
That's a great, yeah. So it is easily the fastest growing county in the U.S. I don't think it's really even close. So pretty amazing. A lot of things coming. There's some toll roads and some major infrastructure projects that are in the works that they're doing their part to help push. And the county's doing a few $100 million worth of infrastructure development just with county buildings and the county facilities. So it's a great place to be right now from a development standpoint, and will continue to be so. I think that all the things are in place to continue to be one of the fastest growing counties in the country for the next decade. And that's why we're spending a lot of our effort here. This is where we're focusing the majority of our time.
And I know we just had an article on self-storage, and then the mention of self-storage growth here. It's not surprising that with the growth of people,
coincidental in any way. Yeah. And that's where it is. You follow the growth. There's a tremendous amount of self-storage has been built in Collin County in the last decade. And there are still good self-storage deals to be done, but there's also some really crappy ones. So I would say if you're investing in self-storage, I would just say be very cautious. The other part of this that I think is very important is the middle market portion and how underserved that is. You just look at the percentage growth of those elements. And we've got a duplex product that we're doing at scale now, and it's desperately needed because we're able to hit some rents that you just can't get with any other product type. And so it's unfortunate that the growth has been slow there, but it's desperately needed. And I think it is a little bit problematic because some of those projects are not as high performing. You look at the multifamily market and how much money that has made in the last number of years. So it's just like the momentum goes there. But I think the momentum has slowed there, and I think there are ways to make great returns for investors in the middle market. So that's where we're focusing a lot of our time. It is a little more challenging. There are some things you really have to be cognizant about, lots of little details to make those projects profitable, but it can be done. And I think it's something that we need to do.
Yeah. And those of you listening in, we had a good episode with Jack Rowe back. I can't remember the episode number, but we had a pretty long conversation about the missing middle. And he talks about a lot of things in there from his perspective on that particular topic. Well, we actually normally would come to an end right now, but we have a bonus fourth article today because this was a topic I wanted to make sure that we covered. And so going into the fourth and final article of this episode comes to us from Fox Business. Headline reads, Home Builders Raise Concern Over Looming Tariffs. And this one is actually a video, so we're going to listen to a video. It's a short one, just a couple minutes, and then we will react to this, and then we will close out the show. So let's go ahead and play this video.
Americans are dealing with a crippling affordability crisis, and the skyrocketing cost of housing is one of the biggest culprits. But it doesn't look like the American dream is getting any more obtainable. Housing starts for single-family homes fell this month from a 10-month high. Fox Business correspondent Jerry Willis joins us now to break it all down. Hey there, Jerry.
Hi there, Lydia. That's right. One of the big concerns for home builders out there, the concern about the impact of what is supposed to be 25% tariffs on imported steel and aluminum set to take effect in March. Now, the National Association of Home Builders says despite their support of the president's aim to create more affordable housing, those tariffs are, quote, totally counter to this goal by raising home building costs, deterring new development, and frustrating efforts to rebuild in the wake of natural disasters. Ultimately, they say consumers will pay for these tariffs in the form of higher prices. Now, of course, as you were mentioning, all of this as we get new housing data today that shows even more housing market weakness. Housing starts falling more than expected, down 9.8% in January to 1.366 million. That's well below the estimate. Building permits were higher, but only by 0.1% at 1.483 million. No surprise then that homebuilder sentiment hit its lowest level in 5 months. Continuing high mortgage rates also weighing on the market. Today we learned weekly mortgage applications plummeted 6.6%. But interesting here, economists say there are signs the market is becoming friendlier to buyers. Listen.
So according to Realtor.com's January data, home price reductions were 15.6% of the market. That is up almost a whole percentage point from a year ago. It is a sign that more sellers are being more flexible on pricing compared to a year ago.
More signs the market might be starting to favor buyers. List prices nationally are down 2.2%. And inventories are climbing. January seeing 3.7 months of for sale supply, the highest since February of 2019. So fingers crossed, maybe things get better for buyers this spring.
Jerry Willis, thank you so much for bringing us those glimmers of hope.
So this is one of those things that we were talking about before we recorded here. It's just, you hear people talk about the tariffs and how impactful they're going to be to the industry. I think the question ends up becoming, what do we want? I feel like as a society, we have to take a step back and look at it and decide what we want. How do we want the government to generate money to pay for whatever programs we still have in the federal government versus, if we reduce those, then where is the money going to come from if we're going to reduce taxes and things of that nature? So I think I feel like a super complicated issue. And there's a lot of tentacles that are reaching into this one. I don't feel like as simple as just get rid of the tariffs because there's a lot of other things happening. I don't know what your thoughts are on this and what you hear as far as, people that you talk to. I mean, they're saying sentiment is at its lowest level in 5 months. And I'm assuming it's because of the tariffs and the projections of what it could do to costs.
Yeah, I think we have to think big picture here. And as Americans, we've been through lots of different things, but we're generally speaking a very young country compared to others. So we need to think bigger picture. How do we maintain our position as one of the, if not the strongest country on the planet? And I believe that the tariffs will put us in the best position long term to do so. But that means over the next 6, 8, 12, maybe 18 months, there's going to be some pain associated with that because that's just the nature of transitioning a system. And you're going to have tariffs go up. It's going to take costs up. Taxes should come down. There should be a net gain to the consumer. But this doesn't happen overnight. This is a year-long or multi-year-long process for all that to even out. And so I hope that the administration is being cognizant of that. But there will be some, I don't want to use the word pain necessarily, but there will be some costs associated with what we believe is a good thing overall. So, the news they've got to talk and they've got to use big, strong words about something that maybe isn't quite such a big deal. The home builders that I'm familiar with and in our organization, we're finding lots of ways to be creative and to mitigate some of the potential risk of tariffs. I don't think it's going to be nearly as big a deal as what they're projecting. Yeah, there's going to be some cost increases. I think everybody can agree to that, but it's not going to be completely life-changing and shut down building. And, now nobody can afford a home. Like that's extreme talk that they would use on the news to try to get you to pay attention. But I don't think that the facts reflect that that's actually going to be the case. Also, we need to keep in mind, they're using national data and we've got to look at specific markets. You've got major metropolitan areas that are having some issues. LA, New York, Chicago, like they're having problems for good reason. Not coincidentally, these are generally more liberal in how they're operated, and those particular governments are having problems, and people are wanting to move to places that are warmer and more tax friendly and all of these other things. So then you go look at the growth markets. These numbers don't fit growth markets at all. In fact, they look nothing like these numbers. So I think we just have to be very cautious. Looking at an overarching, hey, here's the state of the nation's housing market is not an accurate picture of most of the individual growth markets. So if you look at the growth markets, you look where the momentum is, those are still doing well and will continue to do well in 25.
Yeah, and I was going to say one thing too. This last week, coming into this episode, I had a couple conversations with some local developers here in the Des Moines, Iowa area where I'm at, and I heard kind of the same thing. I mean, from one of them is basically lots are selling really well, and they're now starting to look for their next project because things are starting to pick back up. Where they, and just it felt like here that things were moving in a good direction. I didn't get this impression like I'm seeing on this article and that I've seen on some other articles too with the overall sentiment. So I think your mention of these numbers are nationwide. And so there's going to be areas that will skew up versus skew down and things of that nature. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing and hearing, I was just with the Texas Association of Builders in Austin last week, and interfacing with a lot of guys that do the same thing I do, and some at a much larger scale, and they're very positive about what's going on, and they're all building in growth markets, and they're all seeing the numbers say that it's going to be a good year.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to a close here. Anything you'd like to add, Charles, before we wrap up?
No, I'm just having a blast following all these topics. It's good times. It's not boring at all.
No, this is definitely good stuff. And all of you listening in, appreciate you as always tuning in each week. Numbers continue to grow and love to see it. Appreciate you guys sharing this with people that you know in the industry so they can tune in as well. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And with that said, we will talk to you all next week. Thanks.